Hi guys, thanks so much for watching. Speaking of, I'm Stephanie and I am here with Jessica Brewer, who is the Chief Operating Officer at AmplifiedAg, and she was also the former SVP of Engineering and Global Services. Is that correct? Did I say that right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. At Benefitfocus, which is how I met her. And quick side note before we get started that Jessica had a really lovely background. It was very festive. She's very involved with the South Carolina Aquarium. And so I had to do this. I'm not involved with space at all, but it just was what I could get on the fly. So how did you get involved with the aquarium?
I got involved with the aquarium mainly from my best friend and her husband. He's on the board there. And so I went to a lot of events throughout the years with them and starting to get to know the team at the aquarium as well as other board members. And as they got to know me a little more, they reached out and asked if I would be interested in joining the board. And this was about 2 years ago, I think. And it was perfect timing because I had purposely not participated in a lot of boards or that kind of thing because I, had a busy job. And I had two children that were, always doing something. I was always, traveling for soccer somewhere with some kid or basketball or football with another kid and I just didn't want to take on anything else that would maybe hamper my ability to, do either one of those things.
How did you ever develop your passion for all things STEM? And when did that pop up?
Um, I think it was always there. You know, I think even from my earliest memories, I was always like doing puzzles. I was fixing things. I was the kid that would take apart my bike and put it back together. Or I was the one that fixed everything in the house. Or, I just liked solving things and fixing things. And then obviously in school, I excelled in math and science. And I really had some great teachers along the way too, who let me kind of operate at a different pace than everyone else, so I could go ahead, and I would be done with the material maybe halfway through the year, and they would supplement and give me additional material. And so it really helped keep my interest, I guess, too. And I was in a smaller school, so we had a lot more flexibility in doing that. And then I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I think, early on, I wanted to probably be like a doctor and helping people. That was kind of what I wanted to do. And then as I got into high school, I definitely had an affinity for math and science in a heavier way. I took physics in high school. I actually went to school during the summers, taking additional programs, not because I failed anything, but kind of the flip side of that. And I took my first programming course when I was in high school, and I just found it to be very, almost like putting a puzzle together, very therapeutic, fun, just fun to solve things. My cousin was doing great things, in the military. I come from like a long line of some amazing women, all women practically in my family, very dominant women. Way more dominant than I am, and always encouraging me and whatnot. So I really didn't. I didn't feel any, limits as to what I could do or what I could be. I knew that I had to go to college, like I had to go to high school in my brain. That's how you had to do it. I knew I didn't want to be dependent on anyone, for I don't want to say for anything, but certainly not to be able to provide for myself. And so I knew I wanted it to be a meaningful area of study. I had some friends at the time that were going to the University of Maryland. And so while I was pursuing, applying for the Naval Academy and all that, I was also looking at the University of Maryland. And at the time, the University of Maryland was one of few schools in the nation that had a wind tunnel, I think one of 10 at the time. And I got to tour that, and that was pretty amazing. And it was one of those things where it was like, wow, I'd never been exposed. Nobody in my family came from that background. I'd never been exposed to anything like that. it was very foreign to me, although I had, known that I kind of had an interest in, what I thought, flying and maybe being a pilot or something along those lines. I really hadn't thought of aerospace engineering before. And, but going on that tour and, seeing their excitement and being able to experience, that whole facility, it kind of hooked me. One of my dad's friends had said, you should really consider like engineering patent law. Like you would be amazing because you're actually not like everybody else. They could understand what you're saying, so you could kind of bridge that gap. And I think that was one of the first times I realized maybe that, of course, I knew I was maybe a lot different than the average person in the aerospace engineering program at Maryland at the time. The thought of being able, that I was different in such a positive way, that I could, have the technical expertise to go solve problems, but then also have the soft skills that a lot of this kind of person, and I'm stereotyping, doesn't always have. And so I had a little bit of both. And, that was definitely, consistently, that's been an advantage throughout my career. So I did the aerospace engineering, and I really thought one day I was going to work for NASA. That was kind of my goal. Goddard's right out on the outskirts there near the University of Maryland. So I was convinced that's what I was going to do. And then I met the man I ultimately married, and he lived in Charleston, South Carolina. And so I made the choice to come down here, and I majored in math, computer science. I finished up my degree because quite honestly, it was an easier thing to do because I'd already taken so many of those classes. So I really didn't think I was going to be able to get such a good job. I thought, I'll just have to go get my master's and figure out how I kind of get back to, where I was trying to go or whatever. And then I got my first programming job, and I was like, whoa, this is pretty cool. And I was having fun. And so, and I was making good money, and, and I enjoyed it. So I kept doing it. And I ultimately went to grad school and stayed kind of in that field. And I guess you could say it's paid off for me a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
No regrets.
That's pretty unusual in general for a company to have a successful IPO and be able to make that leap. What was it like for you to be leading engineering at a company that was both Benefitfocus deals with healthcare benefit software? And so it's software, technology, and healthcare. What was it like to be leading engineering during the IPO at a company like that?
My whole experience at Benefitfocus was just rather amazing. It was, I learned so much and grew so much in my career just through my experiences at that company. The pace at which we were growing probably was actually harder to me to manage through from a technologist perspective versus the IPO, just because that growth was creating strains, so it's a good problem to have, obviously, but just from a pure technology perspective, the demand was there. You couldn't build fast enough to meet all of the demand, right? So it was actually harder, I think, to manage through that growth during that time versus necessarily the dynamics of the IPO. When you've got a platform where it's one code base, everybody's on the same version of the code all at the same time, and you have 20 million plus members on that platform, it's a heavy responsibility to not, mess that up. I was trying to say it without a cuss word there, but so I was really hyper focused on that, really throughout my career.
Do you think that it's rare for somebody to have, obviously engineering is a traditionally male dominated field. Did you ever have anybody come in and look at you, maybe a new hire, like, oh my gosh, that's not who I expected my manager to be, or that's not who I expected to be 3 levels above me? Did you ever have any challenges with that, or misconceptions, I guess, about who they'd be dealing with?
If I was experiencing some of what you just described, I was, I must have been oblivious to it, quite honestly. I was just going in my own direction. I would say that, I did have the advantage. A lot of the people that worked on my team worked with me for a long time and actually worked with me prior to Benefitfocus, where I was, day-to-day an engineer. So I had a little more credibility probably coming into it, a little street cred there. And, I think in some ways, some people liked it, it's funny to me now in hindsight, because I talk to people that used to work for me over the years, or, they always are like telling me I remember the first time I met Jessica's story. And, some days I hear the stories, I'm like, did I really say that? Or did that really even happen? So clearly there were some moments where they had an impression of me, or, but I don't think it was ever anything related to, a lack of confidence in me because I was a woman or anything like that. I think it was probably the reverse. I think that they enjoyed, especially a lot of the men that work for me, the direct feedback, the frank conversations, and maybe a little bit more, I wouldn't teeter on saying sensitive, because I'm probably not the most sensitive person, but I'm sensitive in the sense of caring and, compassionate, I guess.
What are some of those surprising first day meeting Jessica stories?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I can say it on this forum. So I'll tell you one recent. I was talking to, I won't name names because I don't want to embarrass anyone. I was talking to our general counsel, who had just been hired, and apparently he was reminding me that apparently I did most of the new associate orientations. I represented engineering during those sessions and got people acclimated to, what we were all about, what our stack was, kind of the, just so they could, regardless of your role at the company, just so you had like the basic information about our platform. And I always probably approached it a little differently. So when I would walk in the room, I went around and would introduce myself to everybody first. So I'd shake their hand and find out what their role is, because it also helped me cater my dialogue to the audience, right? Our general counsel said that, because you walked over to me and introduced yourself and said, I told you who I was, and I was the general counsel, and you said, it's about effing time. And I was like, oh my God, did I really say that? And he goes, I knew this was the place for me. And I was like, oh my God. And I'm like, did I really say that? I think he must be exaggerating, but maybe I probably did. And then there's just other comments about people remember the first time they were in a meeting with me, and their stories, several of them are pretty similar to this. It was, some challenge, right? Maybe tensions are a little high or whatever. And I would come in and say, look, we're in this together. Basically, we're all sitting in here, and I'm going to stick here with you guys, and we're not leaving until we figure it out, but we're going to figure it out, and we're going to get through it together. So more of those kinds of stories of me being bold and probably dominant, but then being there helping them get through hard times or, challenging times.
Do you think that the things are what allowed you to move up from, just starting your first career to becoming an SVP?
Do I think what was?
Your boldness, and then the soft skills that you mentioned before, your ability to just really work as a team and be collaborative.
Being able to build relationships, not just with my own team members, but with other team members. It is how you get through the hard times, right? So whether it's, even with your customers, I always wanted to meet my customers face to face, and, there's going to be maybe hard times if you've got a real big implementation or whatever, but if we know each other and I get to know you, then we can work through anything, because because you're gonna love me once you meet me. And but it just, when you get to know somebody personally, it just opens all kinds of doors, and you're able to achieve so much more. So I'd say that's probably, I'm sorry, my dog is loud. And that's probably one of the, one of the things that definitely enabled me. And obviously, I couldn't be those things and then not have been technical or whatever, so it kind of had to be, the combination of, having the background that I had, in parallel with, the softer skills, like, the people skills. And
what would you tell other women who are just coming out of school and are really looking to share the same career path that you have?
I think that the biggest thing is, keep learning, even when you're out of school, especially if you're in STEM, because it's an ever-changing environment, and you want to be positioned to be current and be more marketable that way. And knowledge is power. So as you're learning, it just builds an innate sense of confidence. It's something no one can take away from you. I get asked a lot, like, how did I just do that? How did I become an SVP, or how did I become this? And I don't have like a recipe of how I did that necessarily. I think that the key would be, taking chances, and to quote, I guess, Sheryl Sandberg, like, lean in, seize all the opportunities that you can, because they're all like a learning experience that can leapfrog you to the next point in your career. I think about, at Benefitfocus, and Sean, our CEO, asked me he wanted to start a new business unit. And at the time I was, running engineering, and he was like, I really want you to do this. I think you'd be great. And there was a part of me that was like, okay, I've never like run, managed all these things like sales and marketing and finance and like, yeah, I can manage engineering. And I just, I was probably a little uncomfortable, but I still felt like I could do it. I might not do it as perfectly as somebody else that's got however much experience, running a company. But I felt good that that I could do it, but it was a big change, right? And change is hard for people. And I think you can't be afraid to make change. It can be the healthiest and the best thing for your career. I've always said, where one door closes, another one opens, and it's up to you to kind of walk through that door, and see what's on the other side. And each time that I have taken that chance, it's paid off dividends. And I've heard other women speak about this very thing. It's like, they doubt, a lot of times they'll doubt themselves that they have the credentials to fill this position, and somehow they, were offered it, and they don't think they're, I guess, worthy or whatever, but they leaned in and did it, and it really propelled them to the next level in their career, or set them up. And so I look at just even setting, establishing that new business unit, kind of founding it, and then, working with the team to get it live and all that stuff operational, really set me up then to become the COO of AmplifiedAg, and, not have to kind of relearn what I'd already learned. So it's just, you can't underestimate what each challenge and each opportunity can teach you, and just seize those opportunities.
It sounded like there were two turning points in there that you just mentioned. You mentioned standing up the new business unit, and then also your move to AmplifiedAg. What other moments in your career stand out as defining times, or a pivot, or a highlight?
Certainly making the decision to go to Benefitfocus was a pretty big moment. I had been an engineer for another company. That company was an older, more established software company. I was one of the youngest people that worked there, and I was one of the least tenured people that worked there. So pretty much people were going to have to retire or, God forbid, die or something in order for me to really kind of work my way up, right? And I was literally programming every day. So when Benefitfocus came, it was another one like, do I really want to give up programming? Because I was definitely moving to be more, at the time, like a director of engineering. And did I want to leave programming? Like, did I really just want to manage? Like, I knew I was already doing like project management, managing teams and managing accounts, but I was still programming. So this was going to be more heavy, everything else, and less programming. And that was a pivotal moment because it certainly enabled me then to have the opportunities that I had at Benefitfocus and really get to, really, one of the higher levels of the company.
Why is it so important now for you to continue to reach out? And you said education is important to you, so that part makes sense. But you are super involved with STEM in the community and other women's groups. Why is it so important to you to give back to those groups and make sure that everybody's involved and get all the resources that they need?
Yeah. It's interesting. I for the first part of my career, I wasn't very active, right? And I met this woman, Mary Beth Westmoreland, who you should have on your show one day. She's currently the CTO of Blackbot. I was somehow asked to speak at the Charleston Women in Tech event. And it was kind of, I'd never been to one of their events. And it was, one of, I probably hadn't done that much outwardly speaking engagements, a handful at the time, I guess. And so I was told there's no presentations, there's no, whatever. And so I get there and they introduced me to Mary Beth and she's like, oh, it's a pleasure. She goes, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude, but I'm just getting my slides together. And I'm like, what? I was told there were no slides. And she's like, oh, you don't have to have slides. And she's like, it's fine. And I'm like, so everybody's gonna have slides and I don't have slides? And I'm like, what? She's like, you know what? She goes, why don't we just present together? And we'll just both use my slides. And I'm like, what? Like, can we even do that? Is that even an option? And she's like, come on, it'll be fun. And we literally on the fly just ended up doing a co-presentation together about our experiences of, being a woman in technology, talking through, there's definitely been some times that were challenging. And she was like, really, she goes, I would love to have you more engaged with this woman in tech. And we could do so much, our two companies. And she really kind of got me started thinking about because I guess at the time too, I was like, well, who would really care about my story, or who really wants to listen to what I have to say, and then they were also, the women in tech they were doing other things like Code On, where they're going into lower income schools and teaching kids to code. And, so it just was certainly something that interested me in empowering women, because I do have a strong voice and I'm not shy, but I recognize that not everybody is that way. And so to the extent that I could help them find their voice or have a voice for them, I wanted to be a part of that. I always thought, I was always passionate about, just women and whatnot, but also kids too. And, wanting them to have feel the confidence that I had that they could do anything. We had no money when I was growing up. We struggled, and yet I had no doubt that I was going to be successful and I was going to figure something out, and I want every kid to feel that empowered, and so I've been slowly getting involved in more things. I speak a lot at the local colleges and universities, Clemson, their WISE program. The College of Charleston has a Women in Engineering group. And then also at Carolina, I really feel like when I meet some of these students, these women, they're like so more advanced than I was at their age. Like, I feel like I'm not worthy in some cases, you know, they've just got their acts so together, and like, it's impressive, you know, and it really gets me excited that these are kind of the next gen coming, because they're going to break down all kinds of barriers. And it's just, it gives me goosebumps, like thinking about it, because it's a level of confidence and something that you just didn't see when I was, you know, going to school. It's powerful. And the coolest thing too is that the men that are around them, you know, they see that confidence too. They see their potential. They see their intelligence and their brilliance. And it's really, it is breaking down barriers, and we need more of them, and more diversity in STEM in general, not just gender diversity.